stream. We are live, and I am Brendan Donald. I am here with Sterling. Josh is going to be joining us here in a little bit, but we have a bunch of really good stuff here to talk about today. Obviously, we are going to jump into and talk about the Super Bowl that happened and talk about the Super Bowl halftime show. We have a bunch of other good stuff that we're going to talk about, but first, I want to talk about a little bit of the breaking news that happened over the NFL today that was announced just about 30 minutes ago, where the Pittsburgh Steelers are bringing in Brian Flores as their defensive assistant and linebackers coach. Obviously, Sterling, you are a massive Steelers fan. How do you feel about it?
Oh man, that woke me up so fast. I saw that earlier and I was like, fuck yes. Good mood activated. I think that's a brilliant signing. As it stands right now, it looks like he's just going to be like an assistant defensive like linebackers coach. But I have a feeling that that's just a prerequisite. At least I hope it is. You know, get him in, meet the players, get him talking with Mike Tomlin, see if they can be on the same page. And I'm hoping that they just promote him up to the defensive coordinator spot.
Yeah, I think that is an absolute awesome move by the Steelers to go out and get him in their organization, because one thing that I said when I first saw Brian Flores come a head coaching candidate was, the Miami Dolphins, it felt like they got themselves another Mike Tomlin. They got Mike Tomlin 2.0 or version
Yeah.
2 of Mike Tomlin. And so I think this is going to be a really good opportunity for Flores, because he does get to work with an established head coach like Tomlin, and obviously they do have a lot of comparables. And I think for Flores, not only is this a good sign for him because he gets to learn under Tomlin and kind of see how he has approached all of this stuff the last 15 years of how he's gone about his business. And again, like, I think he's going to have a lot of really good learning opportunities. And the fact that he's still working in the NFL as opposed to having an entire season away from football, we do see with like Doug Peterson, he obviously took a year away from the sport after being let go from the Eagles. But I would always prefer a head coach that gets fired that is, never really should have been fired, not really to take that year off, but to try to still work in with an organization, either going back to as a coordinator or, for instance, in Flores' case, like a defensive assistant, and like what you're saying, that he might potentially be moved into a defensive coordinator role.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad he wasn't forced into taking a whole year off, because that could have hurt his career pretty badly. Yeah, he's an excellent fit. What you said about him being Mike Tomlin 2.0, that's how I felt when he got that Miami job. They definitely squandered him by wanting him to lose games for some inexplicable reason.
Yeah, they wanted to
But
tank for Tua.
this is going to be an excellent signing. It's a good organizational fit for Flores as well. The Rooney family and the Pittsburgh Steelers have been one of the more open and transparent organizations in the league lately. They don't fuck around when it comes to diversity.
No.
So this is an excellent signing. This is really good for Pittsburgh. Starts filling some of those holes in the sideline and front office too, which we need to get done before free agency and the draft. I think it's really important to have those key pieces in place before the draft. That way everybody can be on the same page with who we're drafting, especially with how few picks my Pittsburgh Steelers have this year in the draft. They got to make every single one count. They got to be getting at least one day one starter and a couple of guys that can be plugged in throughout the season and don't lose a step when they're in there.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And funny enough, we are going to be talking about a bunch of, player acquisitions and kind of stuff with our team a little bit later when Josh shows up. But yeah, I think this is a phenomenal move by your Steelers. They have another really, really just genuinely genius defensive minded guy, because obviously Flores comes from the Bill Belichick tree. He's pretty much one of the only Bill Belichick coaches from that tree that really kind of had success. Mike Daniels or Josh McDaniels is having his second go around in the NFL, obviously with the Las Vegas Raiders. But when his first go around happened, he was horrible with Denver. Absolutely
Right.
horrible. But
Well,
yeah,
and look at
so
Matt Patricia too. Matt Patricia in Detroit just absolutely bombed. We can't really be surprised it was Detroit,
it
but
was
even
Detroit.
so, like that's one of those things where, was it Bill Belichick going to Detroit? He probably could have turned that team around.
True. Yeah, but I do look at this maybe going for a head coach in the NFL, especially like with how successful he has been. It's not surprising to see Mike Tomlin be the head coach for what is it now, 15 plus years, 15-ish
Yep.
years.
Yeah, 15 years, and I believe he is one of the winningest coaches in the last 15 years as well.
Yeah,
Not a single losing season.
no. And I kind of look at this move and go, obviously hasn't been any rumors of Mike Tomlin contemplating retirement, but when you've been a successful head coach for 15 years, yeah, he's still young. Mike Tomlin is still a young guy by all stretch of the account, but say for instance, in 2 years, he might want to hang up the gloves. Maybe he doesn't really want to go through a rebuilding thing as a head coach. He's had to deal with a lot of shit in Pittsburgh, obviously dealing with a lot of the Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell situation. The fact that we didn't really hear a whole lot of what was going on with those guys until obviously that, Vontaze Burfict hit, and then
Yeah.
Le'Veon Bell going crazy, and it's like we all kind of sat back and we're like, we got to appreciate Mike Tomlin a little bit more for the fact that he was able to contain that for as long as it was.
I find it amusing too, because if you look back over the years that Mike Tomlin's dealt with, it's all wide receivers that start getting that chip on their shoulder with him. Because he's very much a spread the ball around guy, and doesn't like to have just one key target that the defensive can spotlight. Because even before Antonio Brown, it was Plaxico Burress and Santonio Holmes. He got that big touchdown catch to win the Super Bowl, and then his head got huge, and he thought he was the guy.
Yep.
And it's like, man, like I get that catch won a Super Bowl, but it was one catch. That doesn't all immediately elevate you to, oh, I'm the top wide receiver, I deserve top pay.
Yeah, you're not Jerry Rice now. You're not Jerry Rice now. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's been other issues with guys like Martavis Bryant, but it always seems to be that wide receiver position. I really hope that Matt Canada realized that and brings in a wide receivers coach that can keep those boys calm. I don't want to see the same thing happen with Deontay Johnson. I know there are already talks that he has put notice to the Steelers that he expects to be one of the top paid receivers because his contract is up next year. So he's going to have to prove himself this year, though.
Without a doubt.
He has to put up Cooper Kupp numbers and Tyreek Hill numbers if he wants to get paid like those two guys. Because that's what he was saying, is he wants to be up there with Cooper Kupp and Tyreek Hill. So you got to take us to the Super Bowl first, Johnson.
Yeah, and
so
another
you do that, you stop dropping those passes in key moments, and I think Pittsburgh might finally pay a wide receiver.
Yeah, and the thing is that he's going to have to prove it with Juju Smith-Schuster not going to be there. Again, he was injured for a big portion of the year, but now teams are knowing for a fact it's Juju's out. He's not going to be with the Steelers. So he's really going to have to step that up. And yeah, it's going to be very interesting. And obviously he's not going to have a Hall of Fame quarterback throwing him the ball.
No, exactly. So he's going to have to be hauling in those passes that maybe aren't quite as accurate as, well, to be fair, Big Ben hasn't been as accurate in the last couple of years as he once was. After that elbow surgery, I mean, I can't fault the guy. You have major reconstructive elbow surgery on your throwing arm at 37 years old. You're not going to be able to throw the ball the same way.
No, but even Ben Roethlisberger reconstructed his shoulder is still throwing the ball better than a Mason Rudolph or a Dwayne Haskins.
Right, exactly. And the chat mentions too, now Juju Smith-Schuster, there was some drama there a little bit. Not as much. I don't think we're going to see the same kind of fallout as we did with those past wide receivers. But there's also that other young guy there who had some problems this year with managing the clock, managing his attitude, and just keeping himself in control, which was disappointing since he's a Canadian boy like us. I expect a little more respect out of him. So
a little bit more
who
class.
knows? Chase Claypool, he's got to smarten up if he wants to be the de facto number 2 on this Pittsburgh Steelers organization. Because Pittsburgh has shown before, they're not afraid to move on from a number 1 or number 2 wide receiver.
No, and that's true. And, when Claypool initially came in that first year, he looked poised to kind of take over that number 1 spot because there was a sense that Juju was going to leave in free agency during that first year with Claypool. And then when Juju re-signed, it's like, wow, the Steelers have 2 guys that are going to be battling out for that number 1 receiver spot. And then we just kind of saw Claypool this year when he had that opportunity to really take that next step. He kind of took a step back almost, it looked like.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like he had that sophomore slump.
Yeah.
And then that combined with Juju's injury, that just opened the door wide for Deontay Johnson to thrust himself into that number 1 spot, and he has entrenched himself there now.
Oh,
he had a few bad drops at the end of the season, so again, he has to remedy that. But through the first 15 weeks of the season, he had fixed that problem from the previous year.
Yeah.
And so I think if he keeps working on that in the off season, and he can get those drops under control, he very well could be a top 5 wide receiver next season. Even in that Matt Canada, quick out, slant, screen play style offense, because he's so explosive like Tyreek Hill that I think we could see him really have a breakout year next year. But he's going to need that number 2 guy to help draw some of the attention away. So Claypool really has to smarten up, or Pittsburgh needs to move on from him and maybe draft a wide receiver in the 2nd round that's going to be that new guy.
Yeah.
And I know James Washington is up on contract as well, and he's expressed in the past that he's been unhappy with his use within the organization. He always felt like he should be the number 2 guy, but he never really developed in that way. And so he has always been used as that 3-4 slot wide receiver type of guy.
Yeah. And this all stems back from us kind of talking about the potential of Brian Flores and all the shit that he's had to, or not Brian Flores, Mike Tomlin, all the shit that he's had to deal with. And obviously he's still young, but this is a move that the Steelers could look at and go with Brian Flores going, you know what? We don't know how much longer Mike Tomlin is going to remain with the organization. He could stick around for another 10 years. Or, in 2 years, if the rebuild isn't quite going to the exact standard that he wants, it could be, well, you know what? We're going to bring in Brian Flores and say, you are going to be the next man up. If we do decide, if Tomlin does decide to hang it up. And I think that'd be a great move.
That's a really interesting take, because I didn't even consider that. With how successful Mike Tomlin's been and the trajectory he's on, he could be one of the winningest and longest tenured coaches in history if he sticks it out with Pittsburgh and keeps winning.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what it is. If he keeps having winning seasons, I don't think he's going to go anywhere. He does need to win another Super Bowl within the next 3 to 5 for him to really stick around, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hadn't considered that. I was more concerned the other way with it of, oh man, we're bringing in Brian Flores, who is a top young contender for a head coaching position. Like, are we only going to have him for a year or 2 and then he's going to move on? And so then we're going to have to fill that hole again. But you bring up a good point. Maybe that's what they're thinking in the management is perhaps Mike Tomlin is reaching that plateau where moving on. There's been rumors of it past seasons, and he shuts that shit down from the reporters every time because he's like, no, screw you guys. I'm winning. Why the hell would I go anywhere?
Oh,
and
exactly.
I don't blame him for doing that.
But that's also when he's had a Hall of Fame quarterback, and, he's always had a team that he's always been pretty certain of that can get him a winning season. This is the first time that he really hasn't had a quarterback that he can really rely on.
Yes. Yeah, it's the first time he's going to be going into a season knowing he doesn't have a quarterback. He has had 2 seasons without Ben Roethlisberger, because there was one where he was out due to suspension for half the year, and then that one a couple years back where he had the elbow in, and so he was out the whole season there too.
Yeah.
So he has managed to still win without Ben, but he hasn't gone into a season with a game plan, which I think could be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
He's got the entire offseason post-draft to really figure out what it is that this Pittsburgh Steelers team is going to be next year. Because you and I discussed it earlier in this week, and that outside of the core offense and that linebacker core on the defense, this is going to be a very different look Pittsburgh team this year. Like we're going to be bringing in new tight ends, new offensive linemen, new probably third and fourth string wide receivers, possibly even second string if they decide to move on from Claypool and maybe package him in a trade deal, which we'll discuss later. I've got one sort of keyed up for you. And then on defense, we're losing cornerback Joe Hayden. We got our free safety Terrell Edmonds, who wants a payout this year. So I'm hoping they re-sign him, because that is a keystone piece of that secondary. And if we can keep Fitzpatrick and Edmonds, then we can sort of patchwork around that. But yeah, the D-line and the secondary on the outside is going to really need some work this offseason. So it's going to be interesting to see what the identity of the Pittsburgh Steelers is when we start the 2022 season.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And as an organization who has had a lot of what is our identity going to be moving forward, I'm kind of happy with what it sounds like the Bears organization and their identity is going forward for the next year, hopefully. We obviously need to see what it's going to look like, but when Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus were talking about what they wanted the team to be, and some of the things that really stuck out to me when they were talking was, we want to be explosive, we want to be physical, and we want to be dominant. And I'm like, well, you sold me. And as opposed to, previous regimes where it was like, oh, we want to be able to do this, and that. It's like, well, okay, how are you going to do that? You want speed. I can get behind that. You got to get faster. You want to be physical. Yeah, you got to have some guys that are willing to hit each other. Go out there and be physical. I can get behind that. And disciplined. You know what? That is all in coaching. And going back to Matt Eberflus, he was like, his defenses for the Colts over the last couple of years are some of the least penalized teams, or defenses at least, in the NFL, which I thought was really, really good. And, it shows me that he can teach his players to not fuck around and keep it smart football, which is something that I like to see. Yeah, yeah. So, halftime show, what'd you think of it?
I liked it. I mean, I thought it was good. It was pretty much what I expected it to be. I didn't think they were going to do anything super flashy. Nobody was going to be like jumping off the top of the stadium or any shit like that. These are a bunch of old guys.
Yep.
Snoop Dogg looked like he was having a hell of a time. He had fun.
Yep.
But that's not really surprising. That dude always has fun.
Yep.
I didn't dislike the 50 Cent segment, but I definitely would have preferred hearing a little more from Eminem as opposed to some 50 Cent in there. But I understand they wanted to spread that wealth around and shit. I really enjoyed the amount of shock on like Twitter and social media, and even my wife, when Dre sat down at the piano and started playing, and I was like, are you guys new? Like, did you not realize he was actually like schooled to play piano as a young kid? Like,
Yeah.
he wasn't a gangster his whole life. Like,
No.
he was a privileged child to start out his life.
Well, it's like he learned how to play piano, and for Dre, he, like, I think a lot of people look at Dre and go, he's a rapper, but he's actually a producer. Like, most of the things with him is that he is producing, and to be a musician producer, you have to be able to play instruments and at least the basics of piano. And one of the most famous piano riffs that we ever hear is from the Dr. Dre song. I
Yeah,
forget
still DRE.
exactly. And you know what? Like he came up with that, and you know, like
Yep.
he put that out there. And so yeah, it was funny for me to kind of look at Twitter and people going like, "Oh, he's actually really good at piano." It's like, well, no shit. Like
Right? Shocker, people.
like he's been
You know,
doing
and
it
that was
forever.
the little tribute they did to Tupac. Because I know you were talking about, oh, are they going to bring a hologram of Tupac out? And no, they just went with Dr. Dre, sit down at the piano and play a little bit of Tupac for us. Just do it that way. Little subtle ode to him.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I mean, he produced the whole halftime show as well. You
Yeah.
know, the NFL had a little bit of tweaks that they wanted to make. They didn't want certain lines said. They didn't want certain songs to be sung or parts of songs to be sung because they're, you know, little bitches and they're afraid of the media getting after them for some stupid ass reason. But and he footed all the money for that halftime show as well. He put up $7 million of his own money to ensure that halftime show went the way it did.
Yeah, which is super respectable. And kind of going back to the NFL trying to tell people what to do during that show is they told Eminem, specifically him, not to kneel during the halftime show because obviously Eminem in the past was super supportive of Colin Kaepernick and has called out the NFL on multiple occasions of like what are you guys doing? Like he's not like trying to disrespect the flag or anything. Like he's just trying to do a peaceful way of talking about police brutality. Like
Right?
what are we doing here?
Oh, I know.
And
It's absolutely ridiculous.
the fact that the NFL thought it was a good idea to go up to Marshall Mathers, Eminem, the guy who does not give a flying fuck. We don't want you to kneel. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't think if he got told that he was gonna kneel, there's distinct possibility that he could have. But I think the NFL put that seed in his head, and he was like, "You guys clearly don't remember who I am. Like it does
Right?
not like you're telling me not to do something is making me going to go do it." And I thought it was really really well done, and I loved all the Twitter about 50 Cent looking mad thick, like people were starting to call him he's not 50 Cent anymore. He's a whole dollar bill with how big he is. And
I mean, he's big, sure, but
he's
he's
ripped.
not by any means out of shape.
No.
Like he looks swole. Like people were like getting on him over his weight and shit, and I'm like, you know what? Nobody else in that halftime show would have been able to hang upside down from those rafters and then let themselves down without breaking their neck.
Right? And
You know,
it's
Snoop would have been flying. He did that. You know, the other old guys would have dropped and probably just died on stage. Like that was impressive. It was awkward as hell.
it
Like
was
so bizarre. But whatever. I mean, he looked fucking good,
yeah, like I the way that I looked at it, it was like he looks like he's just been eating nothing but protein and working out.
right?
You know, like he's not doing a whole lot of cardio. He's just shoveling protein powder down his face and lifting weights. That's all he's doing, it seems
Yeah,
like.
yeah. Protein powder in one hand, weight in the other. Yeah, just
Exactly.
switch sides now.
Uh, And another weird thing is that people were also commenting on Twitter that I thought was funny was the fact that they have pictures of Snoop Dogg in like those little houses that they have smoking weed on stage. And it's like
Right?
it wasn't on camera. And they're like, we can't believe he would do that. We're like, fucking Snoop Dogg. Like, I'm surprised he didn't light up on stage during the show.
Right? I'm surprised he wasn't chain smoking blunts.
Right?
Like that's how the dude lives his life. He has a goddamn cooking show based around marijuana. Like
Yeah.
why are you guys shocked? He has spent the last 35 years of his career cultivating this image of the pinnacle of stoners. You know,
Yeah.
like you think of the greatest stoners ever and it's Snoop Dogg and Tommy Chong. Like that's what you think of. Maybe Seth Rogen's getting up in there, but that's more of a Canadian hit
Yep.
there. Like just ridiculous. And going back to Eminem, the NFL should be thankful that the most he did was take a knee. We're talking about Eminem and the amount of things that he could have said, sung, the F bombs he could have dropped, the F bomb, like both kinds of F bombs. I'm not going to say it on here, obviously, because we'll get taken down, but like
Yep.
The shit that's come out of his mouth over the last 20 years, they should be thankful that he just took a knee at the end of that song.
Yeah, and the funny thing was is that a lot of people were confused when he took a knee, because initially when he started to take a knee, I had to like sit back and go like, the fuck is he taking a knee for? And then like it clicked in my head. I was like, oh, it's for Colin Kaepernick. But yeah, there was a lot of people on Twitter going like, why is he taking a knee? Like, why is he just like sitting there taking a knee? But yeah, this is a guy
See,
who dissed the president while he was in office. Like, not the current president, the former
the
one.
orange one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the funny one, not the
Yeah.
senile one.
The clown.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, and I mean, I didn't even associate that. I didn't even think of him doing it as a protest or in support of Colin Kaepernick. He took the knee, and I thought that was just the natural ending point of Lose Yourself so that the camera could pan away back to Dre and Snoop doing their next song.
Yeah, initially I thought it
That
was
was what
him
I
going
thought.
down.
I didn't even associate it with, oh, it's a protest of some kind.
Yeah, I initially thought it was him going down and showing respect to like Snoop Dogg and Dre, because
Right?
it's like he's bowing down to the guys that came before him. And then
Well, and
it
the guy that gave him his shot and his career.
yeah,
Without Dr. Dre, I don't think we ever had Eminem.
I would have to agree with you. Yeah, I definitely thought it was a good halftime show though. Kendrick, I feel like a lot of people kind of forgot about Kendrick with it, which is unfortunate. You know,
Well, I was just disappointed because they cut so much of Kendrick Lamar's song out,
yeah.
and it was a little disappointing. Like I feel like they should have let Kendrick do a little bit more, but that's the NFL for you.
Yeah.
They didn't want him talking about the gang activity in LA and the all that shit. So is what it is. I his was probably one of the more impressive sets though, with the dance moves and the choreography that was going on there. That was really impressive, and I enjoyed it because I'm a Kendrick Lamar fan. I really liked it. There's not a lot of new day rappers that I've been able to get into because a lot of them feel like they're too privileged coming up. A lot of they don't feel like they're from the hood.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like
But that's
they're just giving
because,
them.
well, yeah, and granted, it is because of guys that have come before, like Dr. Dre and Tupac and Snoop Dogg, who really cleaned that up and have gone back to their homes and made sure that these young black kids are not struggling the same ways they had to and fighting with the police on a daily basis like they had to.
Yeah.
So I mean, props to that old school that we got to see at halftime that really changed the face of America over the last 20 years.
Yeah. And kind of going back, this was hyped to be the most, electric, superstar studded, and just supposedly the greatest halftime show of all time. Did I think it was the greatest halftime show of all time? No. But it was still one of the more enjoyable ones, that's for sure. I kind of
Well,
looked at it and
definitely.
it was
Honestly,
enjoyable.
I don't think any halftime show ever will be able to be called the greatest after the one that really shifted the dynamic of that halftime show to what it is today, which was Michael Jackson in the 90s.
Yeah.
The performance he put on is what really changed what the halftime show was. The NFL saw that and they went, oh my God, we can turn this into an actual concert performance at halftime. Prior to that, it was never this big extravagant event like we see today. And I don't know if anybody else will ever be able to rival what Michael did. Nobody's going to be able to go out there. You have 16 minutes to perform. He went out there and stood still in silence for the entire first minute to minute and a half of that performance. And he's like, yeah, this is who I am.
Yep.
And it set the tone for everything we've seen after that.
I think one of the most surprisingly good halftime shows I ever saw was when Bruno Mars did his first one. Because I remember when they announced it was going to be Bruno Mars, I was like, okay, we're just going to get to hear a bunch of sappy bullshit throughout the halftime show. This is going to be great. And I remember I was still decently young at the time. I was in either like the early stages of teenager or I had just become kind of like in that area of teenager. And like I didn't mind Bruno Mars, but I wasn't a big fan of his. And when he came out and started doing his thing, like after the show ended, I was like, holy fuck, like that was one of the best halftime shows I have ever seen, because like he just was just so good performing there, and it just felt really good to see. And yeah, seeing in the chat bring in Metallica, that would be
That would be a
interesting.
good halftime show. I mean, if rap upset all the crusty old white dudes, then I think heavy metal would also upset all the crusty old white dudes. I'm sure they're all sitting there going like, bring Neil Young or some shit like that.
Right? Yeah. I
Not to take away from him. I fucking love Neil Young. So, like, I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying Metallica would upset many people. I think they might have to do a couple years of safe shows again
yeah.
before they can really push the envelope with someone like Metallica.
Yeah, I feel like they're gonna be going back to like the Keshas and like the Pitbulls for like the next 2 years, next 2 3 years, and then they're gonna try to push the envelope again with like a JT or like Justin
Right.
Timberlake and that type of
I mean,
situation.
you know who I'd like to see, but I don't think they would ever trust her to not get naked on stage. So I don't know if she'll ever get to do the halftime show. She's Miley Cyrus is who I'm
Yeah,
talking about.
yeah.
That would
Oh,
be
I
a
know.
good halftime show. But she does her own concert for the Super Bowl every year anyway. For the last couple of years, she
Yeah,
does a pre-show concert on Saturday night. So
nice. Yeah.
I think she's been trying to make her case to the NFL, like, hey, come on, you can trust me. Don't pay attention to my wardrobe slip on New Year's Eve. That was nothing. Ignore that.
Minor details. But yeah,
Right?
obviously,
Right?
we're talking so much about the halftime show. We got to talk about the main thing there. You know, this was a game that I think all of us were extremely excited to go out and watch, because we had an LA story with the LA Rams going into LA, and like this is our opportunity, but then we also had a Hollywood story that could have potentially come up. I remember watching the pre-shows for the show, and all they could talk about was this is like it feels like a movie almost for the Cincinnati Bengals, and like it feels like they're writing like a script for this. It just feels like it's Hollywood. This is a Hollywood story. And then we also have the Rams, where like this is an LA story of how they've had to battle so hard and do this, that, and the other thing. And where's the Joe Burrow jersey? It's currently in my closet at the moment. They lost. I'm not gonna wear it. If they won, I would have wore it. But
Yeah. Where it belongs, in a closet with the moths eating away at it.
yeah, this game was everything that I hoped it was. It was close. It was entertaining to watch. I think both of us thought we were both really hoping it wasn't gonna be New England Patriots versus LA Rams type of game again, where it ends up 10-3, and you just end up falling asleep watching it. I don't think either of us wanted that, and I think we got our money's worth with this game.
Yeah, I think there was lots for everybody. You know me, I didn't really mind that Rams Patriots because I'm a defensive guru. I love that. Watching that was when I had to relent and give my respect to Bill Belichick. So I was like, man, he is calling a perfect defensive game and making Sean McVay look silly.
Yep.
But we got a little bit of everything in this game. It was explosive for the Rams to start out in the first quarter, and then late in the first half and to start the second half, the Bengals started coming out, and then the rest of that third quarter and fourth quarter became a defensive battle. So it was lots for everybody to enjoy, which was really impressive. I think the downside for the Bengals, they waited too long to put their foot back down on the gas.
Yeah.
Like that OBJ injury happened early in the first half, and I think they thought, okay, now the Rams are one-dimensional again. We don't have to worry about them too much. We can just go out and play our game, and that's what they did. They slowly chipped away, moved the ball, and then Joe Burrow, explosive in the second half to start out, gets that touchdown, and they go up. And I almost think that Zach Taylor looked at it and went, all right, we got the lead. They don't have more than Cooper Kupp out there now, so we don't have to do anything else except stop them the rest of the game, and we win.
Yep.
And that was his mistake. He needed to put more points on the board because it reached a point where I think Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp went, these guys aren't going to score any more points. We only need one touchdown to win. Let's stop trying to move the ball around. You just throw me the ball. I don't care if I'm triple covered. I will come down with it, and we will get in the end zone. And that is exactly what they did. And that is why Cooper Kupp deserved that Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah, I agree with you. It felt like to me that the Bengals in the first quarter were really testing out that Rams defense. They were seeing what they could get away with, they could see what they could do, and then in the second quarter, they were like, all right, we kind of got it figured out. We're going to execute the way that we should be. And what they were doing, it was like, okay, like the Bengals have kind of figured out the Rams defense at this point. They're chipping away. They're not trying to take any of those super aggressive long shots. Joe Burrow is getting the ball out of his hands. We understand that the Rams, front four, front seven is going to get after Joe Burrow. And so we need to get him the ball out of his hands quick. And he was doing a really good job at it. Even Joe Mixon was starting to get through those holes a little bit better. And, I was sitting beside my father the entire game where every single time they would run the ball up the middle, he goes, you can't run in between the tackles. And it got to the point where I'd literally just point over to him as soon as it happened. And it was like a soundboard hitting that button going, like, can't run between the tackles. And,
Nope.
They started to kind of get through that. I was like, okay, well, yeah, now they're starting to run between the tackles here, so. And then obviously in the third quarter, they get the ball back and they just go for that. I think it was the second play. They just get Chase. Obviously, there was a no call on that play with the face
Yeah.
mask. But even then, I still think Jamar Chase gets that ball against Jalen Ramsey, and he's taking it to the house. It was a house call, in my
Yeah.
opinion. But yeah, it felt like at that point they took the foot off the gas. They were like, okay, we can take a breath here.
Mm-hmm.
They were finally
And
allowed to exhale.
and that was the problem. They waited too long to get going again. Because they stuck to that point, and then when the Rams did score, they left so little time on the clock that the Bengals weren't going to be able to do those short little quick passes and move the ball down the field, which means at that point, Aaron Donald is able to turn it up to 11 and go, all right, now it is my game to win. And
Yeah.
that is what I think they forgot about. They thought, okay, even if we're down by, 3 points in the end, Joe Burrow can get that touchdown for us. But Aaron Donald wanted that ring.
He did.
And that was just it. When it was the final drive of the game, you can't win that game against Aaron Donald on the final drive. You need to have the lead before then so that you can kill the clock. And that's exactly what happened. And who was it that got that last tackle to finish things off? It was Aaron Donald.
I will say on that last play, if you do look at it, Aaron Donald was very clearly offside. He lined up offside, he did,
Yeah.
And there was a no call, but this is kind of the universe going back and saying, well, I guess we kind of didn't call that face mask on Chase. So, but yeah, if the refs do call that offside on the Bengals or on the Rams, excuse me, on Aaron Donald right there, Bengals win that Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Because even though it was one of those things of like, okay, well, the Bengals are going up against Aaron Donald, and it's really, really tricky for them. And, it's really difficult to win against Aaron Donald, especially on that final drive, and you need a touchdown to win. They needed a field goal to tie it, but they needed a touchdown to win. If that offside was called, the Bengals were moving the ball. They were effectively moving the ball at that point. I really do think they would have won that game.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of going back to the third quarter, it's that they they moved away from Joe Burrow. They felt like they stopped protecting him the way that they did in the first and second halves, or the first and second quarters. The Rams finally got their first sack going into the late second quarter, and we were all like, huh, like, wow, like this is the first time. Like, yeah, the Bengals have done a really good job containing the Rams front seven. And then it was just a fucking shit show from there, of where it looked like the Bengals offensive line were just like door holders, and they open it up like, please sir, come.
Yeah.
Aaron, would you like
Yeah,
a
it's like
sack?
they figured out the weak spot and then they exploited it.
Yeah. Which the weak spot was the entirety of the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line. Like, when Joe Burrow went down, everyone just kind of that was rooting for the Bengals were just like, okay.
Yep.
And then you're seeing him walk off very gingerly like that, and you're like, hands in your face, like, oh God, like no, like he can't have another knee injury. And then he gets up and you see him on the sideline pushing away medical staff like, no, get away from me. I'm not dealing with this. Like, this is not something that I want or need. Like, please, no. Like, I'm going out there. This is the Super Bowl. We are playing in the Super Bowl. You are not taking me out.
No, and I think pretty much every quarterback in the league would do that. If it's the Super Bowl, it's like, you know what? I don't care if my leg's hanging on red. Like, I'm going back out there. This is the game.
Yep.
You know, we can worry about reattaching my patella next week.
Yep. Well, look at Matt Stafford. He had that ankle injury, and I thought when that happened, I was like, if he can't return to this game, it's over for the Rams. I don't care what the defensive does. I don't even know who the backup quarterback for the Rams is, and let alone can he go out there and perform a miracle for them.
Right.
It's not like KC last year where they bring in their backup in the playoffs and he just goes lights out. And then, all he does is get his ankle taped up and he's back out there. He's playing a little bit gingerly with it at first, but I think it was kind of like that moment. He kind of looked over at Cup and he just kind of gave a nod and they both just understood the assignment and were like, here we go. Here we go.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like, all right, if we want to win this game, it's up to us now.
Yep. It's time to go win a super. It's time to go do what we've been doing all year long. The chemistry that we've built. There's a reason that he was breaking records, and it was like, yep, let's just go do that right here.
Right, and I mean, I know Stafford threw 2 interceptions, but I mean, I view one of them as not his fault, and the other one as an acceptable interception.
Yep.
He went for the end zone on one, and it didn't work out. He got beat by the cornerback and got picked off. And the other one was knocked up in the air by his receiver across the middle of the field. And you offer up a duck like that, and defense is going to pounce on it. So I don't really fault him for that one. And I think that was the key moment where they realized that it's going to have to be Stafford and Kupp that win this game.
Well, even the commentators were saying, like, when after that ball got bounced up in the air and it got picked off, it was like, how does Stafford trust any of his other guys other than Kupp after OBJ went out? Because these guys have just not been proving themselves all year long. And, it's been Kupp, and then OBJ came in, and it was a little bit of a slower transition to kind of get moved in. But then once Kupp started to get everything in motion, or OBJ, I should say, got things in motion. It was like, all right, well, we definitely have a really good, dependable number 2 receiver to throw the ball to. And throughout the entire playoffs, OBJ looked phenomenal with his play.
He did, yeah.
Yeah. But you know what? I think, kind of like this last little sour note for the Bengals fans here. You guys had a Cinderella-like year where you have a quarterback who, for whatever reason, people were throwing shade and doubt on because he got injured. Which, for me, I was looking at, like, do we not remember what he just did at LSU a year and a half before? Where he threw 60 touchdowns, and now you're reuniting him with the guy that he threw the majority of his touchdowns to that year. Yeah, we needed to protect him, but he was slow to start out the year, but once he finally figured it out, he showed the NFL that he's the best quarterback in the league. And then he had to go into the playoffs and have a much more difficult road to the Super Bowl than the Rams did. Because you look at what the Bengals had to do. They had to go up against a red-hot Las Vegas Raiders. They just came off of a game where they beat the LA Chargers, a team that realistically they should have lost to. They should have lost to the Chargers. The Chargers were the better team, and they deserve to be in the playoffs I think we all kind of looked at it. We're like, yeah, they deserve to be in the playoffs a little bit more than the Raiders. But the Raiders went out there, won, got themselves into the playoffs. They were red hot. I know you and I both said that the Bengals were going to win that game because we just thought they were the better team. But then they had to go into Tennessee and face the Titans, where both of us said this is going to be an impossible game for the Bengals to win because the Titans have a healthy Derrick Henry, and without Derrick Henry in for that remaining part of the year, they looked amazing. They really solidified themselves as one of the best teams in the NFL without the best running back in the NFL, the most dominant guy.
I almost feel like that's what hurt the Titans actually, was having Derrick Henry out for so long like he was and then plugging him back in. I think it messed with the flow and the chemistry of the offense, unfortunately. And I think that's why they really couldn't get much going. Had Derrick Henry stayed healthy the whole season, or had the injury happened at the beginning and he was back like in week 13, I think we would have had a different storyline.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of hard to disagree with you on that one there, but you also have them beating the Titans, which was huge, and then you're sitting there going like, okay, they have a monumental task going into Arrowhead Stadium during the playoffs against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, who, mind you, just came off of what was one of the most electric football games possibly in playoff history, where you have the Buffalo Bills and Kansas City Chiefs in that game. It was kind of sitting back going like, how is it possible that the Bengals could even potentially win this game? And then once it got to the playoff and you see Patrick Mahomes win the coin toss, everyone's sitting back going like, yeah, it's over. And we're done. Game's done.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The Bengals definitely had a tougher road to that Super Bowl than the Rams did, but being a division rival fan, like, I'm really happy they lost because it finally shows that Joe Burrow's human.
Yeah.
Just because he was so dominant, winning national championships and going first overall and coming back from that injury and just being so dominant this season. I'm glad to see that he is human, because that tells me that my Pittsburgh Steelers organization can build a defense to combat him.
And that's one of the things that Steelers have done for years, is that they don't build teams to do this, that, the other thing. They built teams for years to beat the Ravens. And now it's going to have to be building a team to beat the Bengals, which I know puts a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth because they've always been the Bungles.
Yep, they still are. To me, they always will be.
Yep.
Yep.
But yeah, I was really, really excited about that game. Unfortunately, I just got a message from Josh saying he won't be able to make it today. He's just got a bunch of stuff that popped up right here. But yeah, kind of moving away from the Super Bowl. Obviously, we all saw it. It's over. There's not a whole lot really to talk about much more with it. But yeah, so kind of the segment that I wanted to jump into here next is we were talking throughout the week of a bunch of free agents that we would like our teams to sign. So Sterling, I want you to give myself and everyone else 3 free agents that you would like to see your Pittsburgh Steelers bring into the organization.
All right. Well, I mean, as we discussed, there are a lot of vacancies coming up on that Pittsburgh Steelers roster. Like, we have so many contracts that we need to re-sign, and some of them I don't think we're going to go after. As a result, we've got like $30 million in cap space. We do need to save some of that space for a quarterback. So, I mean, free agent wise, I would still like them to go after Marcus Mariota to fill that quarterback role. I don't think Mason Rudolph is the guy, and I think Mariota would be an excellent fit to run that Matt Canada offense. He's mobile enough that should he run into trouble, he can scramble outside the pocket and find Deontay Johnson or Chase Claypool or Najee Harris. There's going to be a lot of tools there for him to use. That being said, he's going to need more protection on that offensive line. And one of the key guys I think they need to make a push for is Brandon Sheriff. We need to shore up that offensive line in that right guard spot, especially for Najee Harris to be running the ball. So that is a big, big acquisition they need to try and make, is try and get someone like a Brandon Sheriff. Other than that, I was kind of looking, I noticed Eric Ebron, his contract is up, which leaves us with just Pat Freiermuth and I think, can't remember the other tight end, but we need something else there. And so I was looking at some of these free agents, and I thought we might be able to lure someone away from the Cleveland Browns in David Njoku. I think he would be a really good fit on that Steelers line, lining up with Pat Freiermuth in the tight end position.
Yeah, I think all three of those are really good options. I know for weeks now we've been saying on the show that Marcus Mariota looks like the best possible option for the Steelers at quarterback, just because he has a bunch of starting experience, and when he jumped into that Raiders offense as the quarterback, he did look really good, and he does run a lot of RPOs, and it feels like he's the best fit for that Matt Canada offense.
Best and the cheapest. Because a lot of these other guys they've talked about going after, whether it be a Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, Russell Wilson, it's all going to cost you a lot. You're going to have to be trading away a key player. You're going to have to be trading away draft picks. Pittsburgh doesn't have a lot of for this season. And we're very much a build through the draft team, so we can't offer too many of those up. So I really think that free agency is where they're going to have to go for a quarterback if they don't want to stick with Mason Rudolph or Dwayne Haskins, who also they'd have to re-sign Dwayne Haskins. He is a free agent as well, so there's no guarantee that they re-sign that. Maybe they grab Marcus Mariota, stick with Mason Rudolph, try to draft a quarterback, and then whichever one out of Mariota and Rudolph doesn't really make the cut as our number one guy ends up on that trade block and maybe moved out by week 3 or 4.
Yeah. And I agree with you there. But then going after a guy like Brandon Sheriff, the Steelers had a really young offensive line last season, and they definitely played like a young offensive line, but adding an established veteran, especially of Brandon Sheriff's caliber, that instantly just boosts everyone around him, especially if it's a young offensive line who started to show a lot of promise, I would say, closer to the end of the year.
Yes, with how much they progressed through the season, they did get much, much better. And then we've got Marquise Pouncey has actually come back into the fold a little bit and has started working with some of these offensive linemen, especially that rookie center we had in Kendrick Green throughout this offseason. So he's been working with him a lot, and I think that is going to be a big thing. I think we're going to see Kendrick Green make a big leap from that rookie level into an established centerman starting next year. And then to have someone like a Brandon Sheriff on his right shoulder, the rest of that offensive line has improved, and as having that sort of an anchor there in the middle of the line is going to be really key to improving the rest of it. And I really think we're going to see Pittsburgh go back to that Jerome Bettis style offense where we're just going to hammer those D lines. We're just going to run the ball first 3 quarters. I don't care if we only score 3 points, 6 points, because with Brian Flores now coming in on defense to help coach these guys up, I don't think we're going to see that Pittsburgh Steelers defense giving up 100+ yards on the ground every game. And so we're going to see a lot of low-scoring games from Pittsburgh next year, but a lot of explosive fourth quarters, much like this year.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then I also like the addition of David Njoku, adding him alongside Pat Freiermuth. Last year, obviously, the tight end position coming out in the draft, it was very much like, oh, Kyle Pitts, he's going to be a generational talent.
Yep.
And I still think he's going to be one of the best tight ends in the league. And he started, you didn't really hear a whole lot from him unless you were really like a Falcons fan. But that's because he played on the Falcons and they just weren't an amazing team. But he still put up a lot of really good numbers. And it always seems like rookie tight ends in their first year, they seem to struggle. They don't really get out there right away, because we look at TJ Hawkinson, who was drafted a couple years ago. I think it was like 8th overall. And you know what? He struggled in his first year, and now for the Lions in his second and third year, he looked really impressive. He looked like a guy that some people might consider a top 5 tight end in the NFL. But when I look at Freiermuth, if Kyle Pitts wasn't there, any other year he would be a first round pick. Because they had to judge Freiermuth off of what Pitts is capable of doing, which is just so terribly unfair for this kid, because, Pitts is a freak. Like, he's one of those guys that you draft 4th overall at a position that you don't ever draft 4th overall because of just how good he is. And, I think Freiermuth just kind of had that year of figuring out the NFL. And I think going into a second year, he's going to be a lot better, especially in the passing game. But adding Njoku on the opposite side, that is huge, because he is a massive receiving threat.
Receiving threat. And he's a good blocker as well.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing. And the other thing with Freiermuth that has me concerned is he did have 2 concussions in his rookie season here. And so we could see, I'm hoping it's not bad and that he's still good, but we could see a regression from him next. And if he gets another concussion, that could be it for him.
Yeah.
And therefore, that's why I'd like to get a mid-tier guy like a David Njoku. You don't have to go out and break the bank, getting one of these guys like re-signing Eric Ebron or Zach or anything like that that's going to want a whole bunch of money. You just need somebody that, if something happens to Freiermuth, then you're not missing a step at all with Njoku. And then if nothing happens to Freiermuth, you've got the ability to have those 2 tight end sets, both on the right-hand side of the line, for that power offense run game, which is going to be so key with the RPOs and getting Najee Harris involved. And then with the play action passes, which is another key reason that I want Marcus Mariota, because he's really good at rolling out of the pocket play actions and then finding somebody like a Chase Claypool downfield for a big bomb.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So now moving forward, I want you to give me one player on your team that you would like to see the team either move on from or just not re-sign. Because I know you were talking about that a little bit earlier, how you have a lot of guys that the team needs to potentially look at re-signing. But yeah, either one guy that you'd like to see the team cut from in the offseason or just not bring back. And then give me one trade possibility you like from your Pittsburgh Steelers.
All right, well, I mean, like, playing into that David Njoku signing, the cut player or the not re-signed player would be Eric Ebron. He was starting to get a little disgruntled near the end of the season. He was speaking out about how he wasn't getting enough targets. But it just, unfortunately, his role didn't fit with that Matt Canada offense as a growing team. And that's why I don't think they need a superstar tight end in that spot. They need a guy who's going to be willing to block every play and roll off and catch a pass maybe 3 times a game. Whereas Eric Ebron is expecting to get 6 to 10 targets a game. And so I think Eric Ebron would be the guy that you don't spend the money to re-sign him. It's unfortunate that you can't get anything back for him, because he would have some good trade value for sure. But that... it is what it is, As for trades, it's tough. It's really hard finding a trade partner when you don't have a lot of tools to be able to trade. And so something I was looking at, it's an awkward bit of a stretch trade, but I know there's been a lot of talk about Aaron Rodgers going maybe to San Francisco. So I was looking at maybe Rodgers moving to San Francisco They send Jimmy Garoppolo back to Green Bay, who then moves Jimmy Garoppolo on to Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh sends back someone like a Chase Claypool because Green Bay will be losing Devontae Adams this offseason, I believe. So they're going to need another receiving option for Jordan Love. All they've got is Valdez-Scantling now with Devontae Adams going out. So they get Chase Claypool in there. Perhaps the Pittsburgh Steelers package in an extra draft pick in there, like a second or a third. Also from San Francisco, they would be sending a pick to Green Bay, like a second or a third as well. And if that wasn't quite enough, then I think it's time for Pittsburgh to maybe move on from Devin Bush as well. So packaging that in there to just help Green Bay feel a little more secure in letting go of Aaron Rodgers, it would help shore up their defense up the middle as well. But I mean, beyond that, it was really tough trying to find a trade where, Pittsburgh's getting enough value back for somebody like a Devin Bush or a Chase Claypool. It would have to be a starting de facto quarterback like a Jimmy Garoppolo for them to really make a trade anywhere. And I don't think there's any possible deal we could make with someone like Seattle for Russell Wilson to make that work, or even Oakland with Derek Carr. I don't know if that would work so well either. I know the Rams are looking for something, but they don't really have anything they send back Pittsburgh's way. So this was a tough one for me to come up, I'll be honest with you. And that's why I had to really stretch it out and do one of these awkward 3-team trades, because I don't think there's much out there that Pittsburgh's going to be able and willing to do with a one-on-one team that won't result in them either selling the future completely or dismantling the current team we have entirely.
Yeah, I hear you. And, a three-way kind of trade is not something you ever hear in the NFL. It's something that the NFL has definitely looked at exploring. You see it all the time in the NBA, and you occasionally see it in the NHL, but it's not something you've really ever seen in the NFL, which is surprising because it feels like it's something that should be utilized. I remember last year looking at the Chicago Bears and hearing all the rumors of the three-man or the 3-team trade to potentially go out and get a guy like Russell Wilson, because obviously the Bears were really going after Russell Wilson in the offseason last year, to the point where the general manager of the Seahawks said, yeah, we're going to trade you Russell Wilson for 2 first-round picks and 2 players that I forget at the moment. But then, Pete Carroll stepped in. He was like, no, we're good. And I'm kind of happy Pete Carroll did that, because we ended up with Justin Fields ultimately at that situation. But yeah, I think the NFL should explore a little bit more of these 3-team trades, because it opens up so much more for interesting possibilities.
Yeah.
And
I mean, unfortunately, that trade I'm proposing, San Francisco would have to give up more as well. I'm just really not sure what they would be able to. But they're right at the cap anyway. So for them to bring in Aaron Rodgers, they're going to have to cut out a lot of guys. So that's why I was sort of thinking that they would probably package another player in there as well, going back to Green Bay. And that's really the only way that could potentially happen. And as I said, I don't think it's something that any of those teams will really pursue.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
And for me, I also look at San Francisco in that term with the Aaron Rodgers, is they have put so much draft capital into Trey Lance that for me, if they go after a guy like Aaron Rodgers for a trade, or potentially if he does hit the open market in free agency, I do look at it and go, then why did you trade up to draft Trey Lance and spend those 3 first-round picks that you sent to, I think it was Philadelphia that they ended up sending that to? Yeah, you've had a year with him, but Patrick Mahomes, after a year of sitting, Tyreek Hill even said like, when this guy came in as the starting quarterback, we all just kind of sat back and went like, ugh, are we really going to have to deal with this guy as their starting quarterback? And it sure as hell worked out for him.
It did, but I mean, John Lynch isn't John Elway. He's much more intelligent with football operations, and I really don't think it would be a bad idea for them to bring in a top tier veteran quarterback, because Trey Lance is going to be a good quarterback. He is going to be the quarterback of the future for the San Francisco 49ers. But I don't think with Trey Lance, they're winning a Super Bowl next year or the year after.
No.
Whereas you bring in an Aaron Rodgers, you maybe win a Super Bowl this year or next year, and then you've got Trey Lance ready to jump in. And at that point, he is that tier quarterback that could take you to the playoffs and the Super Bowl. So they could be doing what Denver always thinks they're going to do, but never can. Bringing in that veteran quarterback to get you to that top level, and then having your guy ready to take over the reins right away.
Yeah.
Denver thinks they can pull that off, and they never do. I think John Lynch in San Francisco would be able to make that deal and make that work.
There is that distinct possibility, and we love making fun of the Donkeys, the Denver Donkey Broncos, mostly because of their general manager. Elway's not the general manager anymore, but let's be honest, he's the general manager. It's yeah. But yeah, it's interesting to see what that would happen if he were to go into that division. That is a really interesting division, because we jokingly said, or not even necessarily joking, if Rodgers were to go to the Broncos, he's the third best quarterback in that division. And, behind Mahomes and Herbert. And I'm not trying to shit on Derek Carr by any means, but it is one of those things where Carr, he's still for him to be the fourth best quarterback in the division, that's a pretty goddamn good quarterback division. But yeah, and for him to go to a team like San Francisco, he has to face the likes of Matthew Stafford, Kyler Murray, and Russell Wilson as well. So it's interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see for sure. But yeah, I like all the things that you talked about there. But for me, I'm going to say my 3 free agents that I would like to bring in. Number 1, the guy that you were going after right away is center Brian Allen from the Rams. The Bears, like the Cincinnati Bengals, they need to address that offensive line. We saw what happened to Joe Burrow. He got slaughtered, if what it felt like, all year. And he's not the same as Joe Burrow. Like, Fields is not on the same level as Joe Burrow is. You need to protect him. You really do. And Brian Allen, he's 26 years old. He played a bunch of years. He won a Super Bowl. He's not going to be one of those guys that is a wow free agent. Is he going to come out and be the best center in the NFL? No. But are we getting a guy that's top 10? Yeah. So I like that move with Brian Allen, just simply because he's going to be able to be slotted in the middle of the offensive line. He's going to command that offensive line, and he's going to be able to help protect Justin Fields. And to me, that is one of the most important things in free agency, and the draft is going after a guy like Brian Allen to get that help. My next guy is a wide receiver coming from the Arizona Cardinals, and that's Christian Kirk. I feel like since DeAndre Hopkins got in Arizona, everyone kind of forgot about Christian Kirk. Because when he got drafted to the Cardinals, obviously Larry Fitzgerald was still playing and was still there, and he looked like he was going to take over the number 1 role for the wide receiver spot once Larry retired. And then the Cardinals, threw a Hail Mary pass to the Titans, going like, hey, we'll give you an aging running back who's not going to be able to do anything, and a 2nd round pick for, DeAndre Hopkins. And Houston was like, yeah, cool. Like, I still look back at that trade going, I genuinely think the Cardinals sent that offer out as like a joke. Just like, oh, hey, like, we'll attempt this. and the Texans accepted it, and they were like, "Fuck, really?" Like, oh, okay. But yeah, Christian Kirk kind of got put on the back burner. It felt like since DeAndre Hopkins got there, he still had a really, really productive year. I think he was only like 50 yards short of having a 1,000-yard receiving year. He's still fairly young. The Bears do need a number 2 wide receiver, and I think Christian Kirk is probably going to be one of the better number 2 wide receivers in the NFL. And Darnell Mooney, in my opinion, he's going to take that next step in year 3 under a proper offense, a Luke Getsy offense, who's actually going to utilize him properly, and he's really going to ascend to that number 1 wide receiver role, kind of similar to a Deshaun Jackson, Tyreek Hill type of way. And adding Christian Kirk onto that opposite side, to me, it feels like it could be a really good marriage between those two guys, and you give Justin Fields a couple of really, really talented weapons right there. My number 3 free agent is going after J.C. Jackson, corner from New England. We have an elite corner in Jalen Johnson, but then we have a guy that is essentially you and me out there on the opposite side of him from the cornerback position. And when you have an elite guy, you need someone else on the opposite side to help him. Because unfortunately, you can't have one corner and be a successful secondary. But yeah, those are my 3 free agents. What's your thoughts on it?
Well, I think those are good picks. I mean, you put a little more depth into yours for sure. You know me, Pittsburgh Steelers fan, we shy away from free agency. It tends to burn us a lot, so we don't go after a whole lot unless it's as a starter you're going to be coming in. Because even that David Njoku that I put up there, I have a feeling that would burn us if we did that. But no, those are good picks because yeah, you need more weapons and more protection for Justin Fields for sure going into next year. You're losing Allen Robinson this year, so adding Christian Kirk, and then you've got Darnell Mooney, and do you have Justin Jefferson as well?
No, Justin Jefferson is on the Vikings.
Viking, right? Okay. For some reason, I thought he was Bears. So that would be necessary because you guys really need an extra wide receiver there. And then I didn't watch your defense a lot, so we're in a passing league, so adding a cornerback is always a good option.
And a guy who is not only a good corner, but he's established. And
yeah.
And I look at all 3 of these guys that I mentioned, Brian Allen, Christian Kirk, and J.C. Jackson. I don't think you're going to be breaking the bank with any of these guys. To me, a lot of these guys feel like, week 2 free agency, phase 2 type guys of free agency. And you don't need to pay them a buttload of money. Obviously, you are going to pay them some money for sure, but it's not going to be like a Davante Adams. Like, I know Bears fans, like, they heard a rumor, like, oh, the Chicago Bears are going to be targeting Davante Adams. And I'm sitting here like, yeah, that would be nice to have Davante Adams, but do you know how much we are going to have to pay him? We are a rebuilding team. When you're a rebuilding team, you don't go out there and sign a wide receiver to monster contracts.
No.
You only start to get to that point with your receivers, or just really kind of like any big time player, if you are like one step away from really taking that next opportunity at a Super Bowl. The Bears next year, with all 3 of these guys that I mentioned, they're not going to the Super Bowl. They're not. Like, their goal right now is to fight for the playoffs. And yeah, like in the chat, I do believe Davante Adams is going to go to Vegas. Him and Derek Carr are buddies. They are boys. And I think, the fact that Josh McDaniels is there now, I think Davante Adams is kind of looking at that going like, yeah, Derek Carr, who is an established NFL quarterback of quality, made it to the playoffs. He's going to need a new friend at the wide receiver spot because of their last guy deciding to go 130 kilometers on a highway while drunk. But yeah, and these guys have that connection from Fresno State. And I think that'll be a really, really good matchup. And the Raiders are one of those teams that can afford to go after a guy like Devontae Adams to take that next step at going to the Super Bowl. They made the playoffs. Now that
Yep.
next step is going, okay, now we've made it to the playoffs. We need to aim for a Super Bowl.
Yeah,
But yeah,
that is exactly it, and it's smart not breaking the bank in free agency. Like, obviously, Pittsburgh, if they were to go after Brandon Sheriff, which I really hope they do, that is going to cost them a pretty penny. He's looking between 18 to 22 million probably, which is most of our free cap space. Therefore, we would have to move on from some of these other high paid guys like maybe Devin Bush or something like that to try and free up some extra space to pay for a quarterback like Marcus Mariota.
yeah. I agree with you. And I think Brandon Sheriff would be one of those options for the Steelers. It's just like, you know what? This just feels right.
Yeah.
Not only are we going to get the benefit of him being able to be a phenomenal offensive lineman for us, but we're also going to get the benefit of him really, really helping out our young guys.
Well, they need a veteran on offense, because with Ben Roethlisberger leaving now, they literally do not have anybody.
Yeah.
It's a young offensive line, it's a young wide receiver core, youth at quarterback, running back, tight end, everything. Which is great. It's great to have youth, but you need somebody there that's going to anchor that defense and mentor these guys and keep everybody in line.
Yeah.
Maybe one of these young guys steps up. Maybe Kendrick Green working with Marquise Pouncey all off season. He ends up being that guy. But I think there's no harm in having two of them.
Oh, without a doubt.
I think Brandon Sheriff would be an excellent fit for Pittsburgh, and those other two were more of a stretch, free agent signing. I really think that the O-line is quite important, because if we're going to that that power offense run, we could probably make do with Mason Rudolph. I don't think we're winning a Super Bowl with Rudolph, but I definitely think we're still making the playoffs. We're going to beat the Browns every time. We're going to beat the Ravens half the time. And then if we can build up our secondary to deal with Jamar Chase, then we should be able to 50-50 those games against the Bengals as well.
There is that distinct possibility for sure. But yeah, kind of jumping in back to my one trade and one cut. I think for the cut, I'm going to go with Danny Trevathan, our linebacker. When Danny Trevathan initially came with the Bears, I was super excited. But, the last few years, he's just been so injury prone. He's lost not just one step, but a few. And we have Roquan Smith. You don't need to be paying a guy to be your number 3 linebacker when you have one of the best middle linebackers in football as your number 1. And yeah, it's time to move on from him. He's costing us a little more money than I would like to give him. Another guy that I thought about potentially adding to this area is running back Tariq Cohen, which I know a lot of people would find shocking because Tariq Cohen is such a valuable weapon and it would be nice to have on the offense. But when I look at Tariq Cohen, we have David Montgomery as our number 1 superstar back. And then we also have Khalil Herbert as our number 2. When David Montgomery was out and Khalil Herbert was our starter, Pro Football Focus looked at Khalil Herbert and said he's a top 5 back. Like in our rating system, that's how well he was playing. And for Tariq Cohen, he's not going to be anything more than a 3. But, I'm not going to pay a guy to just be in a gimmick play for 1 or 2 plays a game and then be a return guy. We have Jakeem Grant for that as a return specialist now. But yeah, those are kind of the 2 guys that I was thinking for potentially cutting for the team. But my trade, I'm actually going to trade away Eddie Jackson, our safety. I think for him, he hasn't been proving that he was worthy of the contract that we gave him. And he just hasn't been as good as a couple years ago. Back in that 2018 year, he looked like he was rivaling Aaron Donald and Khalil Mack for Defensive Player of the Year. He was that special from that safety spot. But yeah, he just hasn't proved anything. So I think it's time to move on from him. It's one of those things where you look at Dallas, I feel like they would be willing to take on Eddie Jackson because he is a decent enough safety to the point where it's going to be an upgrade for Dallas, and they might send us like a third or a fourth round pick for him, which again, you're not getting a whole lot of value for it, but you're still getting some value. And since the Bears don't have a lot of picks in this year's draft, I would like to see them acquire a bit more and add, more pieces for the future because they do want to build through the draft like your Steelers. But in a year where they don't have a lot of picks, that's where I kind of see them moving towards adding some more free agents than they would like to, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are my guys for that.
Yeah, I mean, makes sense. It freeing up some cap space and getting more draft capital. That's the way you build a good team, for sure. So things are definitely looking up for your Bears. I hope they can make some of those moves for sure. Get Justin Fields the tools he needs. I'm hoping I'm not living in limbo for too long without a quarterback. I'm not gonna sell out Rudolph just yet. Who knows? Maybe he turns out to be the guy that the Rooney family thought he was. I hope so. Because, I mean, if we can get our team going with what we've got on the roster and not have to sign a guy like Mariota, that gives us more money to be able to go out and find a cornerback. Because, as I said, like our primary focus going forward is we got to get tougher in the trenches, got to win those trench battles, and we got to shut down Jamar Chase. And that's a perfect build to also combat the Ravens because they're a speedy wide receiver team as well. And so I think that is the way that Pittsburgh has to go. But we'll see what they can pull off in the next few weeks as we get close to free agency and as things open up there. I have a feeling they'll stick to their guns and probably not sign much for free agents at all.
Yeah. Kind of going back to the Steelers here, they interviewed ESPN's Louis Riddick. For me, going into the GM hunt that I knew the Bears were going to be on, he was kind of one of my dark horse kind of guys. Or I would have been really, really happy to see the Bears potentially pick up. And how do you feel about that if Riddick actually ends up getting the job?
I wouldn't be disappointed at all. I mean, I think that is a good selection. He's got a lot of great ideas. He could be a great GM for many teams in the league. I still have a feeling that Omar Khan is the guy they're going to roll with after Kevin Colbert retires just after the draft. But I mean, I wouldn't be disappointed. It would be a happy surprise, much like waking up to Brian Flores joining our defensive coaching squad today. I would not be upset at all. But as I said, I'm pretty sure it's going to be Omar Khan.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Omar Khan has been one of those GM guys that has been around conversations for getting a GM job for a long time. It feels like it's been like 2 or 3 years now that he's been interviewing for teams and, hasn't quite gotten it there.
I think the reason he hasn't quite gotten it is because he knew that the Pittsburgh job was his when Colbert retired. And he knew that was coming up when Ben retired.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it was, is Omar Khan was interviewing around the league just to sort of get a feel for what his worth was going to be. I don't think he ever really planned to leave the Pittsburgh organization, because he knew that GM spot was his for the taking.
Yeah, I knew the Bears actually had a lot of conversations with Omar Khan, not from the GM standpoint, but the the operator of not scouting, but they actually wanted him for a role above the GM spot of the I think it was the title of organizer of football operations or something like that. Yeah, which I've heard a lot of good things that he might be really, really good and useful in that role. But yeah, I think the Steelers are probably going to end up going with him as the GM moving forward. But yeah, that'd look really good. I want to do a little bit of a fun little thing here. Obviously, the Bengals were the worst team in the AFC North last year, and they went to a Super Bowl. Give me a team that you think was kind of at the bottom of the barrel of their division this year that could potentially not, we're not going to say jump to the Super Bowl because what the Bengals did this year was so utterly ridiculous, but go from worst to first.
Go from worst to first in their division, eh?
Yeah.
Oh, let's see. I mean, I'm gonna have to check and see what the final standings were for some of these squads just to have a real idea.
I know the Broncos were at the bottom of their division. The Lions were at the bottom of their division. Someone's screaming out Broncos.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yep.
Let's see here.
But yeah, that'll be.
And I mean, the Cincinnati Bengals were the worst in the AFC North in record, but that was really only because they lost Joe Burrow. I mean, last season, the Cleveland Browns were still the worst team in the AFC.
But they ended up beating the Steelers in a playoff game.
They did.
But yeah, looking here at the divisions, we had the New York Jets, we had the Baltimore Ravens, and the Cleveland Browns tied up. We had the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Denver Broncos, the New York Giants, the Detroit Lions, Carolina Panthers, and the Seattle Seahawks.
Well, yeah, I think it's going to be that AFC South. I think we're going to see an emergence of Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars. That division is one of the ones that's sort of in flux this year. You know, you got talks about maybe Ryan Tannehill is out in Tennessee, so they're going to have some interesting decisions to make there at quarterback if they decide to do that. They do still have Derrick Henry, so I think they will still be in the running for the top team in that division, but I think the Jaguars will give them a run. The Texans are going to be a mess next year. You know, we still don't know what's happening with Deshaun Watson, so we don't know what that team's going to look like. And the Colts look like they're a little bit in flux this offseason as well. I mean, I don't even know what they've got going for them outside of Jonathan Taylor in Indianapolis.
Yeah, and it sounds like they're trying to ship Carson Wentz. They were unhappy with his play this year, and they're trying to move on from him, which honestly, no surprise there. If you can't beat Jacksonville in Jacksonville with how bad they were this year to solidify yourself into a playoff spot, and it really was. It was Carson Wentz not being able to win that game.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do. I think it'll be Jacksonville. They had the first overall pick last year getting Trevor Lawrence. Do they have the first overall pick again this year? Did they end up finishing bottom enough?
They do.
So, I mean, they're going to get one of the top edge rushers coming out of college as well, which will shore up their defense. And they're going to have a much better coach. You know, they're looking at, like, going from worst to best in terms of increase in coaching quality in Jacksonville. Yep. You know, nobody else is going to see as much of an upside in their coaching. Even your Bears, I know they're getting a great swing upwards with what they've got for coaching now over Matt Nagy, but I don't think it's going to be as great of a swing as we're going to see in Jacksonville.
Yeah, no, I agree with you pretty wholeheartedly there. They are going from a guy who just caused so much, and I mean so much dysfunction in Urban Meyer to a guy who is so steady and proven in the NFL in Doug Peterson. But yeah, I think they're honestly going to go with, instead of one of those top edge rushers, they're probably going to end up going with Evan Neal, the tackle, because they're going to look at what happened with with Cincinnati and go, hey, maybe we should protect our guy. And, you know, there's no wide receiver that's worthy of going first overall that he has a connection with. So you are definitely protecting him.
Yeah, and I think they are going to be the biggest competitor with Pittsburgh for somebody like Brandon Sheriff. I think there's a good chance Sheriff actually ends up going there so that they don't have to spend that first overall pick on a tackle and they can get that defensive end.
I think the team that is going to be the biggest challenge for your Steelers in terms of going after Brandon Sheriff is actually a division rival, the Cleveland Brown, or not the Cleveland Browns, Cincinnati Bengals. I could see them very much throwing a lot of money at offensive line here this offseason, going, you know what? We are not the Indianapolis Colts. We are not going to see our guy get murdered year in, year out and let him retire early. We are going to protect him and win Super Bowls. So I could see that Steelers team get a little bit of in a division rivalry for Brandon Sheriff.
Yep, that is very possible as well.
But yeah, I do like where you're going with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They were one of the teams that I was actually looking at going like, you know what?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they have Trevor Lawrence, who started to look like he was getting more comfortable with it. They don't have Urban Meyer as a head coach. They have Doug Peterson, who is going to be vastly better helping that team out than
And if I'm not mistaken, they have a lot of available cap space.
they do.
And there is a lot of wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs coming up in free agency this year that will be just a massive upgrade over what they already have in. So I think we see them make a lot of moves here in the coming weeks once free agency opens up before the draft even hits. And that could drastically shift the dynamic for what they decide to do in that draft. I'm not even ruling out the possibility that Jacksonville trades out of that first overall spot. You know, if they get enough weapons on offense, they may then look to go, okay, you know, does one of you guys want to swap with us that third or fourth pick? You know, get into that first so you can guarantee get the defensive end guy that you want, and then still have a high enough pick that they maybe Evan Neal still falls to that spot and they're still able to get him without burning the first overall pick, and they're maybe able to get some later draft capital in the second, third, fourth rounds, you know, so that they can shore up that defense a little bit more and maybe even get a nice young rookie wide receiver to grow and develop with Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, no, I hear you there. Yeah, I'm kind of like looking at this list right now going like, who is the team that I want to choose? And I wanted to choose someone different than the Jaguars, but every single team that I look at, I'm just like no, no, no. And so I am going to have to agree with you, and for me I am going to end up choosing the Jacksonville Jaguars because when I look at Seattle, I can see them definitely being better than fourth in their division, but you know, with how good the Cardinals still are, with how good the 49ers are going to be next year, Panthers, I don't see them jumping up too heavily after the season that they had. The Lions are still the Lions, and you know, they have to go through Chicago, Minnesota, and Green Bay. It'll be interesting to see there. The Giants, you know, that division, we always say the NFC East is one of the worst divisions in football. So we might see the Giants randomly decide to become, you know, a playoff caliber team and win that division. But
Right, it is such a dumpster fire of a division, that one.
Yeah, but if they have Daniel Jones, I do struggle with the idea with the Denver Broncos. Do I think the Denver Broncos are going to be a better team next year than 7-10? I do, but they still have to compete with the likes of Patrick Mahomes, you know, Justin Herbert, and now a even more improved Raiders team. I kind of feel bad for the Broncos in a sense of they're just kind of like the little brother looking in, just like, I want to play too, and it's all the big boys going like, fuck off, like, no, like, go away.
Right, like I know, like we shit on John Elway a lot, but he is in a tough spot in that division. You know, like you got to give him that. Like he's going to have to make some miraculous moves to make them competitive there, and I believe bringing in Aaron Rodgers is a big part of that. And if they can't bring Devontae Adams with them because he wants to go to the Raiders, that makes the division that much harder. And so maybe then they start going after a guy like an Allen Robinson or Chase Claypool or something like that to give whoever they bring in at quarterback some tools to make things happen.
Yeah, and even then, like bringing in Aaron Rodgers, I still don't think the Broncos go from 4th to 1, even in
No.
bringing in Aaron Rodgers.
Well, that's the tough thing. I mean, you look at the standings, and none of these teams, I think, could go to 4th to 1 outside of the Jaguars.
Yeah, yeah.
Like maybe like even the Carolina Panthers, like that division itself too is such a disaster right now. You got aging Matt Ryan with the Falcons. They got some tools and weapons, but not a lot. The Saints are what, $76 million over the cap? So they're going to
81.
have to cut a ton of their players before we reach the new fiscal year, which is only in a few weeks now.
Yep.
And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers maybe lost Tom Brady. Now there's all these rumors going around now that maybe he will change his mind and not retire. But then will it be a not retire to play with the Bucs, or will it be a not retire to get traded to a team like the 49ers? Like there's so much speculation this time of year.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell what is real news and what is just reporters scrambling going, man, there's nothing to talk about. Let's, Tom Brady's going to come out of retirement.
Yeah.
Maybe we should write an article. Maybe Brett Favre will come out of retirement again. Like it gets so ridiculous this time of year. But yeah, I mean, there's none of these teams outside of the dumpster fire divisions of the NFC East and the NFC South that I think could improve so much that they become the number one team. Like if Carolina or New York end up first place in the division next year, I don't think it's because they became a lot better.
It's just because everyone around them
their
shit the bed.
division is so up and down so much the last few years.
Yeah.
Whereas with the Jags, they've got legit contenders with the Tennessee Titans that I think they will be able to have a competitive run with for that first overall spot. The Texans, we know, are just a write-off at this point unless Deshaun Watson gets cleared of all charges and is able to play next year.
Well, and the thing is with Deshaun Watson is that not the last year that he played for the Texans, he led the league in passing yards and he was one of the most prolific quarterbacks, and they finished 4th. They won 4 games that year. They gave the Dolphins like the 3rd or 4th overall pick. I don't fully remember, but it was something bad where it was like, even with Deshaun Watson playing at an almost MVP like level, they still weren't able to win more than 4 games. Like that's one of the reasons that JJ Watt left, because he was like, I can't continue to play for these shitty teams.
That's why DeAndre Hopkins wanted out.
Yep.
It's
sure as hell why, Deshaun Watson doesn't want to be there.
Well, and that's just it, that's another bombshell that we could see happen throughout the offseason is, maybe these charges get dropped, he gets acquitted, like we find out that everything's good with him. Like I haven't followed enough of it to know, so I'm not going to speculate. But like if that happens, we could see a blockbuster trade for Deshaun Watson going somewhere, which would shake everything up that we've talked about to this point. It's just, I love this time of year, but I also hate it so much.
Right? Like the first week after the Super Bowl, it's one of those things where every single fan is at its all-time highest because they're like, oh, we're going to do this, and this, and we're going to be a Super Bowl champion next year. But it's also one of those things where it's like from the media standpoint, like where we're sitting at, we're just like, fuck, like, we're just like, we're trying to pick we're trying to find a red piece of hay out of a hay block. It's just like, okay, right. Like, no, that's just what we're constantly keep doing with this. But it's also fun to kind of talk about.
Exactly. Like one of the big ones I'm watching is because I know we're losing him this offseason is Juju Smith-Schuster. He said he wants to go play in LA. Initially, it was the Chargers that everybody was linking him to with Justin Herbert and being the guy there. But now with the Rams winning and them having no tools outside of Cooper Kupp, we don't know how extensive that knee injury is for Odell Beckham Jr. Is
And
he
he's
going
also
to
a
be,
free agent, so.
well, yeah, but I think he will re-sign there if he's good to go. Like, I think he had fun there finally, and he felt like he was utilized properly. You know, that experiment in Cleveland, I think, scared the shit out of him a little bit.
True.
I don't think he's going to chase the money now. I think he's going to chase the championships, which is smart for especially of a player of his age. You know, you don't necessarily go where the money is. You're a guy, but you're in last place in your division.
Yeah.
But like, is it the Chargers for sure? Like, does Juju look at the LA Rams and go, holy fuck, you know, I might not be the number one guy, but if Cooper Kupp's getting double covered, it'll be like I'm playing with Antonio Brown again. I'm going to be wide open all the time, and I'm going to put up massive yards, get lots of touchdowns. I'm going to be in LA where I want to be. Like, that's one of the ones I'm really watching. You know, does he end up going to LA like he wants, or does he take a more lucrative deal with a team like the Denver Broncos or the Las Vegas Raiders or the Jacksonville Jaguars? You know, like, take that money and be the de facto number one guy on these teams. Or does he go somewhere where he's going to be a number two but have a real solid shot at Super Bowl?
Yeah, no, I hear you there. And with Juju, I think part of it goes where he can do the best TikTok dance, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he doesn't want to go to Denver where it's cold and shitty. You know, has
Get
to wear.
lightheaded because you're up in the mountains all the time.
Yep. Yeah.
No. Yeah, I that's why I still think LA is the spot.
Me too. Me too.
But there's definitely other options out there with Vegas and Jacksonville. You know, they're both still warm weather climates. You know, Vegas would definitely welcome his TikTok dances. I don't know about Jacksonville.
Oh, well,
I mean,
the
it is
Florida's
Florida,
it is kind of a crazy land. They might accept it, but
right?
they might also run after him with pitchforks.
Exactly.
But yeah, so and you bring up a good thing that I do want to talk about with Deshaun Watson, that he can, like, with Deshaun Watson, there's so much stuff. The landscape of the NFL this offseason could change like that if a trade is to happen. For instance, like if the Steelers go after him and they get him, well, guess what? The Steelers are right back there in Super Bowl contention. You know, I know Josh probably would have brought up he would have liked to see the Commanders go
Yep.
after Deshaun Watson because that's something that he brought up to us this week. And I'm interested to see if a team were to trade for Deshaun Watson, where he would go and where it would be the best fit. Is it Steelers? Is it, Washington? Is it Miami still? It'd be interesting to it'll be very interesting to see.
Yeah.
Because he really, really would completely change what teams do.
Yeah, well, any team he goes to, it will change the dynamic for sure. You know, the tough thing with, Pittsburgh is who do we cut from that roster? Who do we send away that gives us enough cap space to afford Deshaun Watson?
And without breaking
that's
the
why
team.
throughout all of these talks, I haven't been talking about going after Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson because I don't believe Pittsburgh can afford that level. You know, like we do that and we're right where we were this season. Ben Roethlisberger, we have a top tier quarterback, but there's not quite enough protection around him and the defense is quite as solid so that we're fighting for a playoff spot.
Yeah.
Whereas you go for that bridge quarterback, that middle of the road who's only going to net, $12-15 million instead of 30, then you've got more cap space to spend on an O-lineman or to spend on a cornerback, to shore up that defensive line a little bit. And it makes you a more well-rounded team so that instead of week 17, you're like, oh, we got to win and we need these teams to lose. We're looking more at, okay, we're sitting in the fifth spot right now. We just got to win and we're in.
Yeah, I agree with you there. One team that just kind of came up in my mind that might be in the potential hunt for Deshaun Watson is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yep.
They are heavily up against the cap space right now. and they're going to have to get rid of a lot of people. But I have been saying, as soon as Tom Brady is done in Tampa Bay, you completely reshape that team, because you're going to have to do it anyways, even if Tom Brady was 25. You were going to have to reshape that team, retool, do whatever you have to do. But I look at kind of the Buccaneers and going, maybe it's one of those things. You look at the Houston Texans and go, we're going to give you a first round pick. We're going to give you kind of one of these players that we're not going to be able to re-sign in free agency. For instance, like a Chris Godwin. You send over a first round pick and Chris Godwin for, Deshaun Watson. Maybe, just maybe, the Texans go, you know what, yeah, if we can get a negotiated deal done, if we can get an extension done with Chris Godwin, this is 100% going to work for us, and they send him away. And you know what? Deshaun Watson, he looks at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going, okay, well, yeah, they're going to have to open up a little bit more, space to get me, but I'm away from the Texans organization. I do have Bruce Arians, who is a phenomenal coach, and I might be able to do something here.
Yep. Yeah, that is possible. But I mean, we discussed Deshaun Watson in past weeks too, and like probably a good 75% of the league would be improved teams with Deshaun Watson on them.
Yep. One team I desperately do not want to see them trying to trade for is the fucking Packers, because I could not handle that. Them going from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers to fucking Deshaun Watson. I would not be able to handle that.
I don't know if Green Bay can do that.
They
with
can't.
all the drama that happened around Jordan Love's draft and Aaron Rodgers fallout and everything, I think they have to roll with Jordan Love. They're between a rock and a hard place. If they move on from him already, they're going to look like total donkeys.
Yeah,
You ruin your relationship with Aaron Rodgers, and he wants out of Green Bay because you drafted this guy, and then you're going to move on from him. I don't think they can do that.
No, I agree with you. I do think they have to stick with Jordan Love. Otherwise, they're just going to look like complete a-holes.
That being said, the one that should scare you more would be, what if he becomes a Minnesota Viking?
Yeah, yep.
Because that team is much more equipped to take on Deshaun Watson. They've got Kirk Cousins that they could ship back the other way, so it doesn't cost them as much. And then you're looking at Deshaun Watson coming into that division, and all of a sudden it's Vikings-Bears battle for that first spot.
Yeah, basically any team in the NFC North can fuck off for the Deshaun Watson trade, and that's including my Bears.
Yeah. I mean, he could go to Detroit and they might win 6 games, but I don't think it would improve them that much.
I still don't want to see him, because chances are he's probably going to win those 2 games against my Bears.
Maybe. I mean, the thing with Deshaun Watson is he likes to scramble a lot, and that's why he's done well in the warm weather climates. I think in the cold weather, it gets a little more slippery.
It does.
A little more iffy if you can scramble like that. So, yep. And that's why we've discussed that Justin Fields really needs to get out of that Ohio State mindset and become more of a pocket passer first and only run when necessary.
Yes, and I do think Luke Getsy, our new offensive coordinator, he from what he said he wants to do with the offense is he doesn't want to build an offense and just put players where they need to be. He's going to build the offense around the players, which I like. That is something that I like to hear, is he's building his team around his players. But yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for stopping by today. I've had a lot of fun. Sterling, I'm assuming you've had a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. It's been a good day. I'm still riding high over Brian Flores coming to Pittsburgh.
That's huge.
It's going to make our defense look good. I hope it really helps our run defense especially.
Yep. We'd like to thank everyone here for coming by and hanging out and chatting with us today. We'd like to see you again next Saturday. Same bat time, same bat place, same bat channel. Thanks.
Have a good weekend, everybody.